Welcome to the Jane's Walk Festival 2020 panel discussions.
My name is Nouman Ashraf, and I am a professor at the Rotman School of Management, and I have a real interest in social innovation. I teach a course there called Leading Social Innovation, and I also have the privilege of working with the School of Cities at the University of Toronto in launching the inaugural cohort of the Community Builders Fellowship Program. As we get started, I would like to acknowledge the land on which my university, the University of Toronto, operates. I would like to acknowledge that the land on which we operate is, has been, and always will be sacred land to the Huron-Wendat, to the Seneca, and most recently to the Mississaugas of the New Credit. Now, I make this land acknowledgement not simply because it's one of the recommendations of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, but for a more simpler reason for myself as an academic. You see, for me, universities only exist for two reasons. Reason number one is knowledge creation. And reason number two is knowledge mobilization. And I don't think that we can actually speak of either knowledge creation or knowledge mobilization adequately if we do not acknowledge the knowledge systems of the ones who come before us. I urge myself, the panelists today, the organizers, and everyone on this webinar to ask yourselves this question weekly. Through my actions, be they conscious or unconscious, how am I either enabling or disabling reconciliation? It's not an easy question to answer, but it is an important question to ask. Without further ado, I would like to also begin to locate myself in this conversation. I want to recognize the fact that I am someone who enjoys a huge amount of privilege institutionally and otherwise. One of the things that I really love about the University of Toronto is that at this moment in time, the three priorities of the institution that we are dedicating our strategy towards, one of them is about being a great university in the city of Toronto. When we ask the question, whose space is it? Within the University of Toronto, we need to ask the question not only in terms of who do we open our campus gates to, but who are we shutting out? And it's important for us to ask the question, how are excellence, access, inclusion, community, and growth linked to each other? I'm very fortunate, I feel, that we have a president such as Professor Mayor Gertler, who sees these questions as real questions. And we have been given the right and the opportunity to actually explore that through our research, through our teaching, and through our engagement within community. Today, we have a fabulous panel of leaders, movers, shakers, disruptors, and community builders. So I'm going to ask each of you to please begin our conversation. I really want this to be a conversation that I'm just moderating by answering the question, what's bringing you joy these days? And how do you find yourself here in this conversation this afternoon? I'm going to just go clockwise. I see Sureya Ibrahim. So Sureya, we'll start with you. Please and thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for having me. What brings me joy? Helping other people. When whatever that they are seeking, when I connect to them, or when they're grieving, be there for them. When they need to be listened to, I listen to them without disturbing them. That is, for me, is a joy, I will say.
Excellent. And Sureya, what's brought you to this conversation today? Tell us a bit about yourself, please.
I was recipient of Jane Jacob a couple of years ago. I love my community, and I love to showcase my community. and I love to advocate for my community. I live where I work, and I love it where I am. Um, and having a part of my community is that's where the action takes place. That's where the healing takes place. Um, that's where you help people, where the change takes place as well. So and I got emails, and through my organization, one of the staff members, and Sureya, do you want to be a part of Jen Jacob? Jen spoke. She said, yes. She forwarded to me the email, and I replied to the email. Yeah, I got contact to one of from the staff members, and asking me a few questions. Is there anybody else that I need to be connecting them with? I refer them with a couple of members. And I got email a couple of days ago. I was so busy. I didn't reply to the email, and I saw it. I didn't click that I replied to it. Then when I replied, it was I supposed to be on the panel on Friday, and I because of technical stuff that they were doing, and they asked me, is it okay? And also I had a Zoom the same time as what their request was. Is that okay for you to be on Sunday? And I said, I'm fine. I will be finishing cooking for iftar. We are doing a community iftar, and also we deliver meals for the seniors. Will be fine. After I finish, will be 4 o'clock. That works. That's how I'm here. Um, if you see me closing my eye, I just slept a few hours last night, and marinating, preparing for 500 meals. Yeah, yeah. So that's yeah, that's why I'm here right now. Yeah.
Thank you, sir. I will private message you my address for the delivery for the iftar this evening. Thank you very much. Just kidding. Just kidding. Thank you, and welcome. We're delighted that you're here this Sunday afternoon. Amanda, you're next.
Hi, everyone. My name is Amanda O'Rourke, as you know. So what's bringing me joy right now is my children. So I have 3 kids. I have a 4-year-old, a 6-year-old, and a 10-year-old. And myself and my partner live in a 2-bedroom house with 3 kids and their grandmother. So it's very tight quarters, and we're all at home, which probably sounds quite terrifying, but it's been actually really, you know, we are very fortunate to be in a space where I have my mom here to help us take care of the kids. I know not every family is able to do that, and many are struggling at this moment. We're also very fortunate to still have our jobs. So, you know, we're seeing the joy in the small moments, I think, of connection and being able to spend more time together and see also that intergenerational aspect between grandparent and grandchild. I think, you know, in my work at 880 Cities, we often talk about building better cities from an 8-year-old to an 80-year-old. Although my mom is not 80, it is, I have been able to sort of see what we sort of preach in practice, and the beauty of the intergenerational opportunity of learning. So all this knowledge transfer from my mom's lived experience to her grandkids, and also just having more time to sort of spend with my kids and see them actively learning. So that's what's bringing me joy. What brings me to the conversation? So I just want to first, I think, as a personal and professional responsibility, anytime we're talking about equity in public space, acknowledge that many of the privileges that I come to this conversation with, being white, cisgendered, and coming from middle-class background. So I think it's important to sort of acknowledge that from the outset. I have a background in urban planning and have always been really interested in public space. I went to UofT. I did my master's there. And I've been working with 880 Cities for about 13 years and was inspired by the work that was started by the founder in Bogota, Colombia, which really, if you look at Gil and his sort of background and the story there, was really the the idea in the late 1990s that if you focused on reclaiming public space and investing in parks and streets and public transit, you could actually have a really great social equality outcomes. And that is kind of baked into the organization that it is today. And that is really what drives me and inspires me to do the work that we do in cities around the world.
Welcome, Amanda. Thank you. Shannon Holness, you're next.
Hi, so what brings me joy is walking. I think that, you know, I live in an apartment building. I live in the middle of the building on the 11th floor, and I have a pretty nice view of the neighborhood, and I get to see people walking, but then getting back down onto that ground floor, living in an apartment, there's limited green space, so I don't really have that opportunity. And also, I think one thing that people don't normally like to talk about apartment living is the air pests, the pigeons. So I have a lot of friendly pigeons that come to visit me all the time. And I'm getting my balcony cleaned tomorrow so that we don't have to deal with that anymore, just so that we can enjoy our balcony. So I love walking and getting out. I live right by a ravine, so it's great to kind of walk on that trail. And also, I think one thing that is kind of underrated about, you know, going shopping or not really acknowledged is the great music that they play in grocery stores and in like Shoppers Drug Mart. It's always fun to go in there and like hear your favorite songs from like the 90s. So I like going grocery shopping as well. That's bringing me joy and being around people in a kind of normal environment. I know grocery shopping has been hectic and challenging, but it has been fun to kind of do something that's pretty normal during these times.
And give us a bit of your background, Shannon, please.
Sure. So my background is in urban planning. I entered my urban planning program at York University with a question about housing and the neoliberal housing landscape and how it's kind of changing communities like mine. I grew up in a Toronto community housing neighborhood in Jane and Finch. And so I was wondering, you know, what does it mean to live outside of very academic, the flows of capital, and what does it mean for your livelihood, your quality of life, and your opportunities living in an inner suburban community. And unfortunately, that meant for my neighborhood that our housing had a backlog of repairs that left it uninhabitable, and further, it was condemned. And so what kind of like catalyzed my interest in, you know, public space and rights to the city and questions around those kinds of ideas is the fact that we were living in a city that couldn't find money to, you know, just do some basic repairs over the course of 30 or 40 years. And so I also really challenged the idea that this was still my home and it's still a place that I loved. And I had a lot of great memories in. And so when it comes to the right to make space, it's not always the same for a lot of communities. There are challenges with, you know, with assuming that as your own community, as your own space, for example. And so that's kind of like my assertion into this is like people who live in public housing still have a right to make place and still have a right to heritage and still have a right to culture. And that kind of gets stripped away when we're relocated and displaced throughout the city and things of that nature. So that's me.
Thank you. Antonino, Calarco, you next, sir.
So what brings me joy? I guess during these times, it's the slowdown, because I remember right away, as soon as the NBA was canceled, I'm like, whoa, I guess, you know, now what else is there, right? I haven't been on the TTC. Everything's slow. It's home life. And when I think about it, it's almost as if I'm not used to it, you know? I'm used to constantly being on the go. Yeah, and I'm just taking advantage of the time, spending it with family. I guess it all comes back to, for me at least, the journey, right? I'll probably look back at this time and I feel as if I'll appreciate it. Because every day I'm like, once things go back to normal, you know, whatever normal is, I think I'll appreciate this time that I'm just, again, slowing down.
Tell us a bit about your background, Antonino.
Of course. So I'm a recent graduate of the University of Toronto. Woo. I right now, I live in Kingsview Village, the Westway. It's over by the airport. I'm a co-chair on the Neighborhood Action Partnership table. And in my free time, which is now almost all my time, I take pictures for my Instagram account at Dixon Road TO. So what I use it for is painting a better picture of my neighborhood, and also more recently, engaging with artists in the neighborhood who are also doing the same thing, but haven't, I guess, utilized Instagram and the internet as a medium to kind of catalyze what they're doing. So I like building connections with people. That's also why I'm here. Funny enough, it's through those connections that I've made with people in my neighborhood. I was recommended for this chat, and I'm happy to be here. I'm happy to be here.
As are we. Welcome. Anna Hell, what's giving you joy?
So I just want to echo Antonio's comments and say that on a personal level, I'm getting to spend all this time with my two kids. They're 12 and 15, and they're often on the go, and we usually don't have family dinners because everyone's doing different things, and we're now together. And my partner is a musician who's traveling for half the year, and he's home, and just to have this time to be with people I love and get to know them really well, and we're all working in the same space, and we have lots to talk about. There's something about it that's pretty wonderful. I would say, professionally, I work with people who are not as fortunate necessarily as I am. My work at Together Project is about building social connections with newcomers who may have just arrived. They may be a long way from family and friends. And being able to do that work right now, despite social distancing requirements, doing it online and seeing how people are innovating, whether they're the volunteers or the newcomers, and forming connections online, it's frankly a privilege to do that work. So that's also bringing me joy.
Our opening question is that all of us, I don't know about you, were kind of caught a little bit unaware with the severity, the extent, and the length of what has come to be the COVID-19 era. And as we think about this freeze frame, I want to begin by talking about the fact that I'm very much a get up and go kind of guy. And every morning, it's like Groundhog Day. It's like get up and just as I'm about to leave, I freeze. As you look back on what you were doing in your respective communities, organizations, and personal lives, what pieces do you want to pick up and say, what has this era disrupted? Shannon, we'll start with you. What have you been personally kind of looking to pick back up, please?
I think one of the things that was a bit of a challenge, starting being quarantined and self-isolated, was working. I think a lot of people are looking at the culture of work and the concept of work and productivity very differently. And going forward, we might have some opportunities to kind of reclaim time and space for, areas of our life that are deemed unproductive in like the normal way that we view life, and adulthood, and, preparing for whatever that might be. So I think that, thinking about mental health more, thinking about how we communicate interpersonally, that's something that I want to be more intentional about going forward. And I know it's like not always about, I think urbanism is very glued to that, because as we're going forward and marching forward in this kind of era of COVID-19, we're also redefining how we connect with each other and how we communicate with one another. And I think that, there's going to be a lot of people who are scared to engage, shake hands, have a conversation across, different types of spaces. And so I think that that's something that I'm going to try to pick up more, is being more intentional of the realities that people are dealing with, and around, work and life, and also how we reconfigure connection and joy after this, and connection and joy in space.
Yeah, for sure. Antonino?
I'd like to add that during COVID-19, it's in terms of disruptions, it depends on what you had in planned beforehand. So if you were an organization or an individual that dealt with people, yes, definitely there is a pause, but I think this is time for you to reevaluate your situation and say, how can I still deliver, right? How can I still engage with those people? So in my situation, I personally, I take pictures. So I work with myself and my scenery, but when it comes to engaging with those people, like bringing people into my images, or for example, engaging with, talking to residents, that has slowed down. But during that slowdown, I've been using it to, again, reevaluate. Maybe I should talk to these people online. How can I reach them? Like, is there a better, how can I guess, reduce the disruption, right? And still, again, deliver the same content to my people. Yeah.
Sureya, how about you?
So the first week of lockdown, I used to go to work every day. Like mentally, I wasn't accepting it. And I used to go every day, like doing my Zoom in my workplace. And then my boss texted me, "What are you doing?" So I used to give him my excuse. My teenagers, I have 3 teenagers, they stay up all night. They sleep in the morning. So I do Zooms, and when I speak, I'm so loud, and that's why I'm going to work. Like, so I do my telephone conferencing and stuff. And finally, he started sending me message, and trying to scare me. You know how serious it is, this disease, like doing that? And I said, like, okay, so as a leader, if someone is not going out to help people, how do you expect me to help people? And I said, no, you don't need to be outside. I said, like, the first week, and I said, I need to be outside because there is some people need help. I need to deliver gift cards, or I need to deliver them groceries. You know how the virus is, like, he was like arguing, okay, so this, you're gonna do it by your own. And I said, okay, I'm gonna stop. This is the last week I'm gonna be doing this. So I never stopped going out every day during the lockdown. I used to go every day and delivering gift cards, delivering groceries, doing the Zooms and all of that. Finally, and I stopped, and I started working from home. Then I went 2 days in the center and working on one of the video I need to edit. And he heard me, the alarm was off. He called me immediately. I know it was you. What are you doing in the center? So I said, I need to, like, I'm not gonna go anymore. I'm gonna give up going to the center. So what I did was, in helping the sewing groups, I heard there is a lot of shortage of masks. So I went in the center. There was a lot of donation fabric that I got, and I brought it up in my house. And I said, let's make masks. So they started making masks, and the city councilor shared the mask. They had a newsletter. So about 6 or 7 ladies were involved in the sewing, and they were making masks. And I was so tired of replying to the emails. And I've been getting 25 emails in a day, and people are coming up to pick up the mask. And I used to deliver the mask to the seniors who cannot come. I used to mail it to them, the mask. And as of today, about almost more than $3,000 worth of masks was sold. All proceeds goes to the ladies. All of the masks that the fabric was donated, and we ran out of the fabric. And I just got yesterday some fabric, and we ran out of elastics as well. We are waiting the shipment. So they became innovative, and they start using bed sheet. And they went to Costco and they bought a bed sheet to make the mask. So that's what they are doing right now. And after a few minutes, someone will be coming to get the mask. and just getting overwhelmed, and I get so tired. It's a good challenge to have, but it's good. This is where the juicy parts for me, that to feel my soul. Yes, Zoom is great. And we do all of our stuff in telephone conferencing, Zooms, the support mother space that I support. Every week we meet. The program that some of them was canceled, we're going to be proceeding healing circle this Friday, coming Friday. But all of stuff, and I had hard time accepting. I'm people person. I need to hug you. I need to see you. I need to see your the expression and everything. For me, the Zoom was it's great, but I wasn't getting that satisfaction that I need. So I need to be outside. I need to serve the meal. I need to take the meal to the senior buildings. Like you need to be careful. It's okay if I die. Like if it's meant to be, it's okay. Like I will die one day, but I need to step in to do what I need to do to help the people who cannot go out. They've been told, the seniors, not to go out. So someone needs to take the food for them. So I've been stepping up doing that. That is a huge joy for me. So my boss doesn't know this I'm doing. So yeah, it just during this the challenge, it's a lot of good things that came up with lockdown as well. And my kids at home. One of my daughter is nurse, and she just started last week to the hospital. She was quarantined. She was traveling. Yeah, like she's fine. All of us fine. Like the panic is, I cannot accept that panic. There is.
Got it.
We need to step in. We need to do what we have to do.
Thank you. Thank you. Amanda, how about you? What were some things that you were in the midst of doing that this COVID-19 thing stopped, and did you looking to pick back up again?
Yeah, great question. So we certainly, I have a small team, 8 full-time staff, and so we went through the sort of logistical piece that Sureya was kind of talking about, of just making sure people were safe and getting them set up at home. We also, as an organization, that focuses on transforming public space and bringing people together in public space as a way to encourage social interaction and increase physical activity. It certainly was like tricky for us to think about how do we think about all these projects that were on the ground in the midst of physical distancing. So that was certainly a challenge for us to sort of think about. I can give you a really specific example. We were just wrapping up some projects that we were working on, pilot projects we were working on in 3 US cities that we've been focused on using sort of public space and animating public space as a way to address social isolation and work with communities that are socially isolated and bring them out more in winter. So it's called Winter Mission. We were working with 3 US cities. We had done a lot of engagement with our city partners and local community partners who are doing the on-the-ground work, and they were just sort of wrapping up some of their pilot projects where they were, bringing out really simple, very community-led ideas around how to bring more activities into the local parks. In Buffalo, for example, we were working with the block clubs because they said, oh, there's so much great programming in the downtown. How can we actually animate our local public parks where they're really kind of dead and desolate in the wintertime? So it was simple, like games and activities and things for kids and things for seniors. And so we really literally had to say, stop, don't do any more of that. Clearly, public health was giving us pretty clear advice that we needed to tell people to stay home and not be out in public space. At that time, that was in the early days. And so we had to start to think about, we had this whole plan of evaluating how many people were coming out as a result of some of these projects. Another example was like a gear share program that was happening where the libraries were offering different gear for people to be able to be physically active in winter. So, we had to really think, how do we actually evaluate some of these projects that were stopped short? and work with our local community partners to make sure that we're supporting them. We're not like, you know, many of our community partners were on the front lines working with communities that were also just as vulnerable during COVID-19, right? So what we were able to do, and it was interesting to see that a lot of those relationships that we were able to sort of help facilitate and encourage, and those partnerships that were built through the winter mission program that had been happening for a year and a half, starting from last winter and then to this winter, they were able to sort of capitalize on those existing community partnerships to get to the people who they had identified were socially isolated during the pandemic as well. So an example was, you know, giving door hangers to residents that they had already engaged as part of the winter mission program, for them to identify, I need help, I need someone to support me getting groceries if they were, you know, not able to get out. They were able to, they had already kind of identified people in the community that were in need of masks, and sort of they had mapped out some of this this piece as well. So I think what we learned was, while the projects themselves didn't exactly make sense, the relationships and those partnerships that were supported and facilitated were really rock solid, and were able to be leveraged in the midst of a crisis as well. So I think we saw great stories coming out from each of those 3 cities that we worked with, able to like pivot relatively quickly and actually get to the residents that we had kind of identified as being more isolated and vulnerable.
Thank you. Anna, how about you?
You're muted, Anna.
Sorry. So Together Project, our flagship welcome group program is about fostering social connections between newcomers and volunteers. And of course, this involves typically a lot of in-person interaction. People meet in homes, they meet in public space, they go to the library together. We also have a program called the Urban Nature Access Pass program for newcomers, and this involves taking newcomers and volunteers to explore Toronto's urban parks and green spaces. So, you know, as soon as COVID-19, as soon as it became apparent that social distancing was going to be in place for a long time, we realized that we really had to pivot and figure out, you know, if and how we were going to be able to continue to deliver our programs. So we reached out to our newcomer constituents and our volunteers to find out, you know, do people still want to participate in the program? Do they still want to connect? And, you know, we decided very quickly, based on the feedback that we received, that actually kind of now more than ever, social connections are very important for everyone. I think for, you know, the newcomers have expressed, you know, just a desire, you know, to have access to information and also just like social connections, because many of them have just arrived and don't know anyone. We serve a lot of single moms who are alone with kids in small spaces. But as well, we've been very surprised by what I would call a huge increase in the number of people who are contacting Together Project and who want to volunteer. And I think this has to do in part with the fact that, you know, people are really, you know, they're feeling isolated and they want to reach out, and this is a real opportunity to kind of share your, you know, ability to access information that may not be available in many different languages, and work with an interpreter to make sure that, you know, newcomers who want to consume that information in their own language are able to, you know, to access it. There are so many newcomer families who were not able to take advantage of the TDSB opportunity to get like a device and internet so that their children could participate in online school. And, you know, our volunteers have had a real impact in helping newcomers access the new kind of online public education, public space, you know, way of teaching. And also, you know, language learning, like language classes aren't happening for the most part right now. And this is a huge kind of first step in, you know, being able to integrate into, you know, a new culture in a new city. And so a lot of our volunteers are participating in kind of like they're scheduling informal language learning practice with, you know, with the newcomer families who've requested it. And I would just say overall, you know, we thought that this idea of kind of remote social support might not work. But what we've found is that people are using WhatsApp, they're using Zoom, they're using other online platforms to strengthen existing social connections with some of the matches that had already happened. But also we have these new matches where people are meeting for the very first time over WhatsApp, and they are really able to, you know, form a relationship and help with some of the integration challenges that are, you know, longer term, but also specifically related to COVID-19.
Thank you. So one of the things that I have been thinking a lot about is this idea that COVID-19 has unearthed what I call privilege inequity.
Mm-hmm.
So in terms of what we can access, in terms of what we, you know, what resources we can actually literally put our hand up and self-identify our need for. So we only have time for two questions. My first question on this one is, what do you think we have learned about community, about reclaiming space? So I think this idea, you know, that somehow everyone's got equal space of cyberspace is nonsense, right? There's a lot of stuff that's built into that. There's a lot of assumptions that are built into that I think that COVID-19 has laid bare.
Definitely.
What are some lessons that we have learned, and how are you as leaders going to take those lessons into the post-COVID-19 situation? And you can share stories or anecdotes or things that you've learned from folks. So we'll start with Antonino. We'll start with you.
Definitely. So I work before COVID-19. Most of my work took place online. So as an artist, as a photographer, I used that as my outlet to reach out to my community. And I didn't really think about it any more than that. The internet is an open space. I thought it was great to connect with people. But post COVID-19, you really start to think about, oh, I mean, people are still using the internet, but what about the people who don't have access to the internet? What about the people who may not be as technically proficient? It really challenged my view of how I'm delivering my content. Also, what I do is a lot of community engagement. So when it comes to talking with, for example, I'm working with Arts Etobicoke. We're using a park in my neighborhood to put on an art show in the summer. With all the events, I think up till July, August now are canceled, all the public gatherings. So that was canceled, and we're currently in the stage of like reevaluating what we're going to do. But we're using this time to, I guess, deepen the conversation, see how much we can pull out from the community. And it goes back to reevaluating how we're using this time, thinking about what is important now. Yeah. Just to add, I felt that I've always enjoyed the arts, whether it's audio, visual, anything. I think this is a good time for us to dip into that. A lot of people I know who are artists, creatives, are using this time to practice their art form. And I think it's good for us all to recognize that and even look at our own creative senses right now, because I think at the end of the day, that's really important. It's it's inherent to us as humans, creative, being creative. So that's one thing.
Thank you. Shannon, how about you? What are you learning? What do you think we can take from the learning or lessons from across communities in terms of making space, holding space? Because, you know, one of the things that we said, you know, this idea of, you know, shaking hands will be taboo. I also think that holding hands will be taboo. And what I mean by that is, how do we actually hold space, and how do we actually make that happen post-COVID?
I really appreciate you asking the question in the way that you did. And one of the things that I'm excited to talk about is my tenure on the Community Healing Evaluation Advisory, because we had an amazing update on what it means to hold space during these times. And the Community Healing Advisory is, it's a project for crime prevention and intervention that takes a trauma-informed and peer-based approach to addressing the impact of exposure to community violence on youth. And you mentioned that this time is also laying bare a lot of inequities and a lot of challenges that people have socially. And us being kind of, you know, a lot of us are kind of dealing with being regulated in space in a new type of way, but also the fact that it's exposing us to economic insecurity. That is something that will always drive crime rates and expose communities to violence. And so the impact of that is something that the Community Healing Advisory tries to address and has been trying to address for a long time, because the city of Toronto, in terms of gun violence, has kind of had a crazy spike in the last few years. And what is the response? And the city has kind of taken a responsibility to really mobilize around that, using local people as peer healers and putting them in a training and teaching them how to hold space with one another. And so what was exciting about the update from the Community Healing Advisory was that they were maintaining those trainings and also trying to figure out ways to get the most deeply marginalized of our communities to participate in those trainings, but also to respond when there is violence in a neighborhood. And unfortunately, last week we had a 15-year-old die from gun violence in the Jane and Shepherd area. And so we recognize that a lot of the challenges that we had are going to continue and maintain and also intensify. And so I think that when we're talking, one of the things that was really cool was the response to getting everybody to kind of curb that digital divide when it comes to getting everybody online. Not everybody has the access. So one of the things that the manager at the City of Toronto said was like, the City of Toronto manager in the social finance division that kind of deals and leads this project and steers this project, said is that, you know, an internet stick is going to be just as much of a resource as a token. And a lot of the equity interventions that were made prior to COVID-19 and getting people to participate was giving them bus fare and a metro pass or something so that they can be present in these types of trainings. And also the equity measure, like, unfortunately, we still can't, in this time, we can't provide food for people who need it. And also a necessary respite, safe spaces. Some of these trainings offer that kind of opportunity for people. And so I think that that's kind of, I'm sorry, I'm kind of getting away from the question a little bit. I'm trying to remember it, but I think that is what, you know, COVID-19 is laying bare. And the response, if everything is going online, is to give everybody an internet stick and still remember that peer healing is an essential service. It's not something that we cannot essentialize and we can do without, because youth are still going to be dying and people are still going to be experiencing vicarious trauma and need space to put that grief. And so I think that it's very important to kind of acknowledge that that's very much needed.
Thank you. Sureya, what are you learning? What are you hearing as you are connecting with community? What are you going to take back from this experience as we think about community engagement, holding space more broadly after COVID-19?
So one of the things that I wasn't ready for it, or I don't have enough knowledge about COVID-19, and I have a member of community who are in our group in Mazar space who are away, and she had the COVID-19. And how can we support her? We don't know much about the virus. And how can we prepare ourselves? There is unknown stuff. How can we be? Are we gonna be using Zoom? But is it doing justice to the people who are really want to have a tea and sit down and talk to you. And they are not used to this technology. And like I feel like I'm forcing on them to use it, than that they want to use it in their will, that they want to use this technology. Give them as option than forcing on their choice. So yes, it's good having technology, but at the same time, you cannot underestimate when you're serving the communities that face to face. People feel comfortable in sitting down and sharing what their sorrows, the anxieties, and that's how, especially it's a relationship, and the trust, and that's how we build the community. How we've been building that trust among each other in the community. You cannot build also a new relationship in Zoom, unless you have knowing this person already. It is hard. There is assumption about like who is this person. Like you need to having a meal with that person, having a tea, or meeting that person in a gathering, and that building that relationship. And in the Zoom, it won't tell 100% of your body language, your expression. All of that it will take away in Zoom than in glimpse of like, I'm gonna tell you this is what I'm going through. Yes, I definitely hear you, but and how can you help the seniors? Like they don't have any technologies, and they've been told not to leave the house. Like that's more vulnerable in our society, the seniors. That how do you ignore them? Like yes, technology is great. Like I'm grateful that we could use it as an option. We cannot underestimate the power of the technology, but at the same time, there is a lot of people that we're gonna leave behind. That mindful of those people, making sure that like they are not compatible with the technology. The TDSP are great and giving the technology, the parents, the kids. If you have kids in the school systems, if you don't have kids in the school system, where do you get technology on those for those individuals who are their kids are growing or they don't have kids at all? So let's not leave anybody behind. Yes, there is a lot of things that I learned. It's okay to work at home, but once in a while I do have anxieties. Like Sureya, you are not sick while you're home. Like once in a while I do get that. But there is like we need to leave the house and help the people who really need. Like
thank you. One of the things that I've heard in what you just said, Sureya, is that access and agency are not the same. So technology can give you access, but technology cannot necessarily give you a sense of agency that you have because you've got choices in front of you. Amanda, I'm coming to you next. What are you learning? What have you learned that you're going to take into the post-COVID-19 era?
Yes, I just want to say, Sureya, I totally agree with you. And I think you raised a really important point around there's no one-to-one replacement. It's not a substitute. There's, I think, a lot of, pivoting to things online, but when you're working directly with community and building new relationships, with trust being the most important thing, when you're especially working with communities that have had broken trust for a long time, you can't sort of make this assumption that a Zoom call would be a direct replacement for one-on-one meetings and tea and being in their home like you do and building those relationships over time. So I just wanted to say I really appreciate that point because I think it's a really important one. In terms of 880 cities, I think one thing that I'll just touch on that maybe that hasn't been is that we're watching is, I think, for 13 years, we've been talking about the right to public space for people, no matter their age, ability, or socioeconomic status, and who has sort of the right to be in public space has been sort of really monopolized from a very very limited scope, and this is really laid bare amid COVID as we see how much of our space we've really allocated to private cars as opposed to allocating space for people. I'm an abundance thinker, and I think, you know, what COVID-19 has really shown us, and I think shown to a lot of people, is how much of our space we've really given over to people who have the wealth and the privilege of being able to move around the city using a car. You know, we see a bit of a resurgence in cities around the world looking at opening space for walking and cycling. And that's really encouraging for us. I think in many cities where they have real clear leadership around the vision and the values that they want to create a more sustainable, more people-oriented, human-centered streets, which are, by the way, 75% of our city's public space on average tends to be our streets. So this is a great opportunity for us to look at how that space has been allocated and reallocate it for creating opportunities for everyone to be able to move in that space safely. I think we're also seeing you know, some of the decisions being made around closing parks and public spaces. Certainly understand in the early days of COVID-19, the public health's directive of, you know, getting people to stay home. But as we understand that we're in this for a longer period of time, and as we have more information about the safety aspects of that, and who gets, you know, how that disproportionately negatively affects people who do not have access to backyard space or are living in precarious conditions. Maybe their home environment is not a nice place to be hanging out. So really thinking about how we can think of all the space that we have in our cities and open it up for people to have access, equitable access to the mental and physical health benefits that they provide.
Thank you, Amanda. Anna, what do you got in terms of what are you going to be taking away from this that we learned going forward? Please and thank you.
So there was a really interesting report that was written almost a decade ago called The Characteristics of Building Welcoming Communities. And one of the 17 characteristics of a welcoming community was access to public space. And I think now that we have almost, you know, partially lost that access to public space, I think it's just incredibly important that we all continue to advocate for strong investment in public space. It's a place where we get to see our kind of diverse, inclusive communities. That they have a face, there's experiences. I think, you know, it's just so important to recognize that we've lost something and we want it back and we want to invest in it. Similarly, I would say that there are significant barriers for some populations in accessing public space. We need to work hard to remove those barriers, whether they are a lack of transit, you know, it's not a 10-minute walk to your local park, you can't read the signs, you know, we have to continually try to make public space more accessible to all. Finally, I would say that I am now a passionate believer that the digital commons is a new kind of public space, and that we should seriously consider, you know, internet being accessible in all public housing, that everyone in the TDSB has a device. Every single student has a device simply by going to school. I think COVID-19 has laid bare that people who are not able to access education, language classes, healthcare through some kind of digital device, or you know, they're trying to access information on a phone that's being shared between multiple family members. It's not good enough. So I think moving forward, we really need to consider what digital commons look like, and we need to invest in it.
Thank you. I want to blend a question that I have and a question that we received online. Emmanuel Mellis raises this concern about the future of social cohesion post-COVID-19. I would like each of the panelists to please complete the following sentence. And I would encourage those that are watching us to also, in your comments, to complete the following sentence. In order for us to enable social cohesion post-COVID-19, now is a good time to do blank. Fill in the blank. What do we need to do as leaders in and across communities to enable social cohesion? I want to hear, starting with Shannon. What do you got? Very quickly, the first thing that comes to you. And people can go online and put in their comments in the online forum. Thank you.
I would say find ways to honor the geographies that are, you know, underrepresented or undervalued.
Thank you, Shannon. Amanda?
I would say open up more space for people, but I think that's the tool. I actually ultimately think that we need more diverse leadership, people with more diverse lived experience at the table, making the decisions about what gets prioritized and what doesn't. Sorry, that was a long answer.
Thank you. Anna, now's a good time to fill in the blank, please.
Now is a good time to find a way to volunteer with someone who does not share your co-ethnic, co-religious, co-national background. Get to know someone who's very different than you are. The path to social cohesion is to build social bridges between people who have less in common, not more. That's a way for everyone to build a bigger box and learn, you know, learn things that they might not have learned otherwise.
Thank you. Sureya, now is a good time to fill in the blank, please.
Pay attention to the youth as well, because a lot of youth are not getting attention that they need. And look at the gun violence that we have throughout the city. That we need to listen to the youth and pay attention to their needs as well. Not cutting them off and acknowledge what they are going through. It's so hard to be a youth, but at the same time, meeting their need, meeting them where they are at, so we will have productive societies.
Great, thank you. Antonino, now is a good time to fill in the blank, please.
So I think a good way to promote social cohesion would be to take this time to go out into your own communities and document, at least personally, go around and look at what can be changed, what can be improved upon. Now that our regular social behaviors are forced to change, so a lot of us are, you know, practicing social distancing. Now's a good time to take to look at it through a different lens. What in my community can be done to improve accessibility? What can be done to create a better living space? I think now is the time to do that so that we come out of this more together.
Great. Online, I've heard now is a good time to support community networking and action. Now is a good time to talk to your neighbor. Good time to start a join a community hub. Now is a good time for better housing people who are housing insecure. Now is a good time for engagement that addresses both passions and needs. Now is a good time to reach out to seniors in our communities. Now is a good time to develop a simple learning framework. Now is a good time to be more patient with diversity. Now is a good time to reevaluate who are essential workers and why these people are often likely to be women and also undervalued in our society. Now is a good time to donate, volunteer, or cheer. For me, now is a good time for us to share our stories and to listen to amplify and to hold space for the story of others. Often those who may have internalized this false belief that somehow the stories don't matter in our society. I want to thank all the panelists. I want to thank Sureya and Antonino and Anna and Amanda and Shannon for a gripping conversation, a dialogue, and I don't know if you know this, but we're into overtime. We're 2 minutes into overtime. And I want to thank Jane's Walk, Tio, Igor, Mahadi, and the rest of your tremendous colleagues who have done this. I just want to say to the panelists and to the organizers, we had stiff competition today. The weather is unbelievable out there today, right? So people are actually going out for physical walks. I still think it's important for us to pay attention to public health orders and to have safe distances between us. I have really learned a lot. I have really enjoyed this. I'm going to put out my Twitter handle, my Instagram on this conversation thread. I encourage everyone to stay connected and to continue the dialogue. It's been a delight. I am proud of my city, and I hope that we can make this a city that is inclusive and engaging for all. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks.
You're welcome.